Okay, so I thought I would explain my TicTacToe in English and also add all of the new, let's call them features that I added after our discussion. So as per usual, you start up with your three basic files. You open your index.html, style, and script. JavaScript file, I mean. So this is my boilerplate, the basics. CSS and JavaScript is linked. I don't like linking the script at the end of my HTML, but if I add defer at the end as an attribute of script, then this is going to be read last when the HTML file is opened in the browser. Apart from that, we have the name. I added a div and the class is play area. So this div is going to contain all of the div elements. Of course, there are no more divs here because I'm just going to generate them with my JavaScript as the children of play area, of my play area div. I have also added the end screen, which is going to contain just the text of, congratulations, somebody won, and a button. That's it. So the HTML file is very basic, and the rest of it is done by the CSS and mostly, of course, by the JavaScript. So let's start from the beginning. First of all, I create a variable and I call it play area, and I just assign my play area div from the HTML. We also need a starting player, and since we have two players, all I am doing is just generating 0 or 1 with math random. Math random gives you a fraction. It's a very long one, so that's why I have to round it so that I get a 0 or a 1. When I start the game, I don't actually know who the starting player is. It can be either O or X. Well, I got lucky there. So we have a 50-50 chance at that. So first we have to create the board. This is the function that is actually going to draw the board. I started off with a for loop here, and I added 9 here because I want to create 9 divs. So let's call my new divs cells, and here I create those divs with create element. This creation is going to happen 9 times because of the loop, of course. I am also going to add these divs to play area with append child. So play area, let's append this new cell. So as we are looping through, we are adding these divs to my play area. Fantastic. And if I were to check, well, at that point I checked, of course, whether it happened, and when I opened play area here, I could already see that I have my classes. After that, I also add the cell class to them with class list add, and that's why we have the cells here. So after the creation of the board, I have to add an event listener to each of these divs. The thing is that I only want to click on them once and no more. So first I created this variable called grid, and I should call it a const, I think. And this should work. It doesn't make that much of a difference, but whenever you are not changing your variable, it's best practice to call it const instead of let. So grid array contains all of my divs, all of my cell divs. And now I can loop through them with the for each method and add them an event listener. It's going to listen for a click, and it's going to call the add mark function. I call it add mark because we are adding a mark inside a div. And this is the neat part. If I put this in here, then whenever I click on the div, it's only going to accept one click and no more. So if I click once, then I cannot click on it more times. So it's all fine and dandy that I have the event listener, but I am not actually adding anything when I click on these. So first I check what the first player is. I am using a ternary operator because after checking the condition, I get to do two things. So arbitrarily I decided that 1 should be X and 0 should be O. So whenever I get player 1, then I change the event target's text content. And of course the event target is going to be the div that I click on. So after each click I have to check whether a player won the game or not. And I also have to make sure that the next player is not player 1 or player 0, but the opposite. And the way I did it was with another ternary operator. So I checked for single player, and if it was 1, then we change it to 0. If it was 1, then we keep it on 1. And that's it. There is a much better solution. Thanks to Tóth Gábor, I now know what an XOR operator is. And if we use this guy, let's remove the assignment operator for now. If we do this, then the XOR operator is going to compare these two sides. If we have matching values, then this operator is going to return 0. If we have differing values, it's going to return 1. And for our purposes, this is perfect. The only thing that I can get here is a 0 or 1, and I set this to 1. And the only way I can get the same values is when the starting player is 1. And that's when I am going to get 0. And that's exactly what I need. So if I add the assignment operator here, then starting player is going to equal to 0. But if the starting player is 0, then we have differing values, and it's going to return 1. So if it's a 0, it's going to turn to 1. If this is a 1, then it's going to turn to 0. Fantastic, and very nice and neat solution. So I can delete all these comments because they were only here for the sake of presentation. So now we already have a very good basic functionality for the game. But so far, well, this game stops now when somebody wins the game. But as for now, the check win is not there. So let's just remove that. So at this point of the creation, this is what I am working with. And of course I'm very happy, but the game still hasn't ended. So let's go for the check win part. And of course, before we turn to the check win, we also have to cover win conditions. This was the more difficult part of this, and this is where I added 100 lines of code, of course. You can have 3 marks in a row, in a column, and diagonally. That's 8 possibilities. I specified all of these victory conditions line by line for X and O, and that's about 16 times 3 lines of code, and you also have to add the brackets and the formatting of prettier. So that's why the code was very long. So what do I do here? Taking the grid array, and they are numbered from 0 to 8. So with the slice method's first number, I can say from which point I want to cut out a certain number of elements. From the first element, I want to get the next 3, which is the top row. From element 3, the other next 3, and so on. And this is how we have the horizontal victory conditions. For the vertical victory conditions, it's a bit more tricky because the numbers there are not in ascending order. But if we think about this, we have a 0 here, we have a 3 in this square. Okay, so this is an X, but okay, this is a 0, 3, and then 6. If we divide these numbers by 3, we are going to get a 0. And this is what I am basically saying. I am filtering out my grid array by saying that, okay, give me all the divs that are divisible by 3. And that's going to be this column. It also stands to reason that when I have a remainder of 1, then we are going to get this guy. And when we have a remainder of 2, then we are going to get the rightmost column. And that's it. And now we are left with the diagonals. For this diagonal, our job is relatively easy because this one is 0, this one is 4, and this one is 8. and these guys are divisible by 4. So that's it. However, the other diagonal is a bit more tricky, because these guys are 2, 4 and 6. And well, I am not a mathematical genius, unfortunately, so I just told the computer to divide these numbers by 2. And if I divide my grid array by 2, I am also going to get 0 and 8. I'm going to get all the even numbers. So I just add that whatever I put into my filter, those elements should not be 0, and they should be higher than 0 and less than 8. And that's why I am not getting this guy, and that's how I have this other diagonal. That's pretty much it. So how can I handle these in a meaningful way? So this is the check win. After each click, this is going to run and check whether a player has won the game. I am starting an if statement, and I am going through all of my win conditions with sum. My win conditions is an array, and it has 8 arrays inside. So all I'm saying here is that if I have at least one of these arrays that adhere to these conditions, then I have a true. Then this if statement is going to return true. And what are these conditions? So right now I am calling an every method on one of these guys. If every one of them has a text content of either X or O, then we are going to get a true. And that's it. So each time the computer checks for all of the possibilities, and if at least one of these victory conditions has every element as an X or O, then we have a true. We have a match. And then I can trigger the endgame. So let's go to endgame. What does endgame do? It's a relatively big function, but it still hasn't exceeded 10 lines, so that's absolutely fine, at least for me. So first of all, I'm changing the body's background color to gray. That's it. So when I So when I win the game, this is why we have this somewhat semi-transparent background color. After that, I also change my end screen to display flex, because by default my end screen is set to display none, and that's why we cannot see congratulations, someone has won, and the button. So that's how they appear. Well, I have to separately set the button. I set it to block. These 3 lines can basically handle the appearance of our end screen. After that, I have to check who actually the winner is. Since I check for the victory condition after a click and adding the mark, and I still haven't changed the starting player, I can just check who the current player is. So let's see. If starting player is 1, if starting player is 1, then X has 1, otherwise O has 1. And what are these lines doing? I have a span element inside the victory text or the congratulations text, and it has a winner class, and it's empty here, but I am changing the text content to either X or O depending on who has won the game, and that's it. After that, I had to also include what happens when the game draws, like this. Then it says it's a draw and I can restart the game. So how can I check that? We have a draw trigger here, but we have to go back to our check win first. So whenever I call endgame, I am also passing in a number. So this number is actually the draw trigger. And whenever I get a 1 for draw trigger, then this is going to happen. So far so good. Now I have the logic behind checking whether a player has won or not. But I also have to add the draw condition, and it's right here. So if no one has won, Then we check grid array, and I can just do an every method on them. If every div's text content is not nothing, then we have our draw condition met. And I am calling an endgame. I am calling an endgame twice here. So whenever somebody has 1, then I start endgame and I pass in 0. But whenever we have a draw, I pass in 1. So let's go up. Here I call those two numbers just draw trigger. And I am only handling draw trigger 1. If draw trigger is 1, then I am going to change the text content of this line here. If you look at this, we have end screen, and then I navigate to H2. If we look back here, you can see that I have my end screen, H2, and inside here I just change the whole text content. It's going to remove my span, congratulations, somebody has won, stuff like that. And I am replacing it with it's a draw. And that's it. It's relatively easy. Whenever I get a 0, well, then nothing really happens. Only the beginning part of this. So whenever a draw happens, the game actually displays that depending on the current player, X and O has 1, but it suddenly replaces it with this new text content. And that's how the game works. So let's see again, just a diagonal or a horizontal. Let's see a vertical, and let's see a draw again. I can restart it, and everything seems to be in fine working condition. And that's it.